are fine. And I'm going to be giving this training, at least the first part of it. I'll be going over new buildings and alteration CO jobs. And then I'll be handing it over to my colleague, Abhishek Namani, who will be covering temporary bins. So here's what we're going to cover in today's session. I'm going to go over some ground rules. Then I'll talk about what job types are. And I'll talk about how to file these new job types in DOB Now Build. As part of filing these job types, you will be filling out a schedule of occupancy as part of the scope of work tab. I'll talk about fees and rules for the job types. I will also talk about how the new job types affect subsequent job filings and PAAs, as well as site safety and tenant protection for those job types. We'll then get into temporary bin requests. So by the end of the session, you'll be able to process job types in DOB Now Build. You'll be able to understand the difference between a bin level schedule of occupancy and a job level schedule of occupancy. You'll be able to create a schedule of occupancy. You'll be able to request work permits, file PAAs, and subsequent filings on the new job types. And you will be able to request temporary bins for new building jobs. So Mark already covered a lot of this, but I want to go over this anyway. There's a lot of people in this training. We have about over 250 people. So you're going to remain muted for the entire training. We do, however, want you to ask questions in the question and answer panel. We have a team of DOB experts that will be attempting to answer as many questions as they can. Questions that are not answered, it usually is because we need to do more research, and the answers to those questions will be published on the frequently asked questions page when we get that up. You can, if you go to the DOB Now training page, you can see a similar frequently asked questions page that, or a couple of them from the December release. But please do ask questions, and we will attempt to answer as many as we can. And like I said, if we can't, we will research them and make sure the answer gets posted. We also will, as we go, have a couple of knowledge check questions that I'll ask you to answer. And in addition, when this training is finished, you will receive an email with a link to a survey about the training. Please do fill that out. We really do take it seriously and want to give you the best training we can, and we can only do that if you tell us what was good and what didn't work. So I'm not going to go over a lot of how to use DOB Now Build because it's been around for a while, but I'm going to tell you, I really think it's a great system. And some of the features and benefits, it allows you to submit a job filing online. You don't have to travel through snow or rain or even gorgeous weather to the DOB office. You can get real-time job filing information at any time, day or night. And there's a lot greater transparency of the filing process. Once you have submitted a filing, you can watch as it moves through the process, because each time it moves from one step to another, it will get updated on the status bar. And of course, the goal of all of this is to lead to faster processing time. We will be evaluating service levels once the rollout happens, which will be on March 1st. Until we know how many things are coming in, we can't determine what the service levels will be, but we will be working to do it as quick as we can. So let's talk about job types and about the schedule of occupancy and what the current state is versus what the future state is. Currently, all job filings in DOB Now Build are treated as alteration, and each job filing leads to a letter of completion, and that includes both initial filings and subsequent filings. Alteration jobs, as I'm sure you're familiar, are what used to be called Alt 2 and Alt 3. In the future, instead of looking at everything as a plain old alteration, we're going to introduce a job type structure. So I want to go through what the different job types are. First, there are new buildings. The determination of what is a new building has not changed. It's the same rules under which you filed new building jobs in BIS. But the big difference for new buildings in DOB Now Build is that the end result is not a letter of completion. It ends in an impact to the certificate of occupancy. Cranes is not changing, so I'm not going to go into that. In terms of alteration, there's going to be two types of alteration jobs. Plain old alteration, which leads to letter of completion, like we've already seen. And what we're introducing is a type of alteration that impacts the certificate of occupancy. This is referred to as an Alt-CO. Alt-CO jobs are the new name for what used to be called Alt-1 jobs. We're also introducing no work. No work is actually a category of job that was folded into alteration, but we're now pulling it out. And I'll go into a little more detail on that in a few minutes. Full demolition is going to be in DOB now, but it is not there now. If you have a full demolition job, you will still be filing it in BIS for now. We will make sure that you get notice before that enters DOB Now build, and there will be training offered. So let's look at how this might work out. We have a new building job, and it gets filed on January 1st, the initial filing. And so that's the filing level. And then at the work type level, the work type is general construction. As you will see, both new building initial filings and Alt-CO initial filings require general construction as part of that initial filing. Then on March 15th, we file the first subsequent filing, which in this case is sprinkler and plumbing. On June 30th, we file the second subsequent filing, which in this case is curb cut. These are just random dates. You can file a subsequent filing as soon as you have submitted your initial filing. You don't have to wait for it to be approved. But all three of these jobs are going to impact the certificate of occupancy. And there will only ever be one certificate of occupancy for a building, and we'll talk about that in a bit. So what that means is that rather than getting a separate letter of completion for each filing, the filings are all going to impact the certificate of occupancy, and the certificate of occupancy will simply be updated as each filing is complete. So the current process for jobs that result in certificate of occupancy require you to fill out a paper document and bring it into the borough office of DOB, and then DOB loads the information into BIS. So on the paper PW1, if you look here, the job/project type, the two types that we are looking at are new building or alteration type 1 or alteration type 1 required to meet new building requirements. Those types, those job types are the ones that are entering into DOB Now build. So we're introducing new building and we're introducing Alt-CO. As I said, Alt-CO is the new name for what used to be Alt-1. And under Alt-CO, we have a new category, which is new building with existing elements to remain. This is an exact parallel to alteration type 1 required to meet new building requirements. It's the same thing, it's just been renamed. Now, one of the things you'll see as we go, the schedule of occupancy that you file with your job filing must be reviewed, must get a zoning review. And that's part of the job filing review. We'll talk about that when we get a little closer to that. We are also introducing an option when you're making a payment to pay either 50% or the minimum filing fee, or you can pay the 100% of the filing fee at the time of job filing. We're introducing temporary bin requests, which will be the last topic we talk about. Now, the one thing in this whole process that we're saying of handling new buildings and alterations that impact the certificate of occupancy is that the certificate of occupancy request for the jobs that are filed in DOB Now build is not being rolled out just yet. It will come this spring, but it is not part of this release. So let's get into a little bit more detail about these new job type classifications. New building job type is used when you construct a new building, and it's under the exact same rules as when you have a new building job in biz. Alt-CO, the new name for Alt-1, when you go into starting a new job filing, it's not going to ask, do you have an alteration or an Alt-CO? Instead, if you choose alteration, it will ask you a series of questions to determine whether it's an alteration or an Alt-CO. The first question is this alteration required to meet new building requirements? If you say yes to that, then the result is an Alt-CO job type of new building with existing elements to remain. If you answer no to that first question, the next three questions pop up. Alteration is inconsistent with the current certificate of occupancy, alteration in occupancy or use, or alteration is a major change to exits. If you answer yes to any of those three questions, then it will be an Alt-CO. And only if you answer no to all of them will the next question pop up. The last question asks, is this an alteration in the number of stories? If you say yes, it's an Alt-CO. If you say no, then it is an alteration job. So you must answer no to all of the questions for an alteration job. Otherwise, it will be an Alt-CO of one type or another. But biz is not going away. As Mark said, anything that is in D status or after as of Monday will remain in biz for its entire life cycle until you get to occupancy, because occupancy is all being moved to DOB Now Build. And if you haven't attended it yet, I highly recommend that you join our other training for this rollout, which talks about how to request occupancy for biz jobs. Also remaining in biz are affordable housing job filings, fee deferral job filings, full demolition job filings, OT other job filings that include scope that's not yet in DOB Now Build. That's things like marquee, solar, green roof, and BPP. And EQ other that includes scope that's not yet in DOB Now Build, such as suspended scaffold. Just keep an eye out for when those are moving over, but for now, every one of these is remaining in biz. So let's look specifically at terminology. And this is, by the way, part of the reason that we recommend that you download a copy of this presentation. You can download it from the DOB Now training page. But in case you ever need to refer to this, if you forget, a new building is a new building. Okay, that's not changing. But alteration type 1, Alt-1s are turning into Alt-COs. Alteration type 2 and alteration type 3 are just being called alteration. Place of assembly is a work type within the no work job type. I'll be talking more about no work job types. And sign is a work type within the alteration job type. So you will see these as we go. Now, when we talk about no work, there's actually a couple of different kinds of no work jobs, and it's not all in DOB Now Build right now. No work job type in DOB Now Build currently only allows you to file place of assembly and temporary place of assembly job types. Subdivision, SI and SC, or letter of no objection, LNO, are to come, and they will be in DOB Now Build at some point. They are not there now. Also not in DOB Now Build is Alt-1 no work jobs. Those are remaining in biz until further notice, and that includes change in occupancy and change in egress. Now, if you are filing an Alt-1 no work job, then you do need to still request your certificate of occupancy and the related schedule of occupancy in DOB Now Build. And the process for doing that, again, is what we're looking at, what you can find in the other training we are doing for this release. So let's talk about the process of actually requesting these jobs. So first thing you're going to do, of course, is you're going to log into DOB Now Build. You're going to log into DOB Now. You're going to hover over DOB Now Build and choose New Building Alteration No Work. Once you get in there, to start a new job filing, you click plus job filing. And then you'll be asked to choose your job type and then click next. So let me show you this in the live system. So I'm going to log in. I'm going to hover over DOB Now Build and choose the top option. And then I'm going to click plus job filing. So I want to talk a little bit about these. We talked about no work. No work is used for place of assembly or temporary place of assembly. And no matter which one you choose, you would then move forward to start filing. For new building, if you choose that, it gives you the job type of new building. And notice that general construction is auto-selected because general construction is required for new building jobs, the initial job filing. You can combine that general construction work type with any of the work types that are allowed to be combined with general construction: earthwork, foundation, mechanical systems, or structural. You make your choices and then you choose your review type and you can move forward. Limited alteration isn't actually a new work type. Limited alteration is a way of skipping all the questions we're going to see under alterations. Basically, this is work that is restricted to plumbing, oil burner installations, fire suppression piping repair, and/or replacement of existing equipment that does not include any construction work. These work types never include construction work, and so licensed master plumbers, licensed master fire suppression piping contractors, or licensed oil burner installers may choose limited alteration and skip straight forward into doing their job filing without going through all of the things that they have to click to make a choice. If you choose alteration, we start getting the questions, and we talked about this. First one is the alteration required to meet new building requirements? If you say yes, then the system chooses the job type Alt-CO, new building with existing elements to remain. It auto-selects general construction, and then you can combine it with these other four. If you say no to the first question, the next three questions pop up. If you say yes to any of them, then it comes up as an alteration CO job type. And again, general construction will be auto-selected, and you can add to it with the four that are allowed. If you say no to all of these three work types, or these three questions, then it asks, is this an alteration in the number of stories? Again, if you say yes, it will give you Alt-CO. If you say no, it will be a job type of alteration. And you'll notice that there are a lot more work types available. Instead of just 5, this is all the work types we have. And those are all available for alteration jobs. So I'm going to do an Alt-CO so you can see the process. And then, of course, once it auto-selects general construction, I can choose to add to it. I'm not going to right now. When I click my review type, I can then click submit, and it takes me into the job filing after warning me that the selections cannot be changed. Okay. So this is what we were just talking about. If you answer yes to any of the questions, the work will result in a certificate of occupancy, and your job type will be alteration CO. You choose your filing review type and select yes to confirm your selections. Now, things about filing review type. The responses to these questions and the review type you choose cannot be changed once you select yes on that confirmation for that filing. So job type on the initial filing will also be applied to all subsequent filings and cannot be changed. However, the review type can be changed on subsequent filings. It cannot be changed once you select it for this initial filing. So along those lines, I have a quick knowledge check that I want to make sure everyone is clear on. True or false? Will pop up in just a moment. True or false? Review type. You can change a job filing from standard plan review to professional certification at any time. Is this true or false? Please answer the question. We'll give you 45 seconds for each of the questions, and then we'll share the results. So answer your question, please. All right, we'll see the results in just a moment. And the answer is indeed false, as the majority of you got. For your initial filing, you cannot change the review type once you've made a choice. You can change it for a subsequent filing. Now, another thing that we talked about, general construction is required for new buildings and for alt COs. And you can choose to add one of the work types that's included with it. And then you get into your PW1. So I want to go through some stuff about the PW1. Some of it is going to be very familiar. You must fill in your location information. Now, I want you to notice something is different here, because in alteration jobs, there's a section under location information that's called work on floors. That does not appear for alt CO nor for new building, because the information about what floors you are doing work on will show up in the schedule of occupancy, which will show up under the scope of work. You also need to fill out your stakeholders. This is not new. When this blue box pops up, please make sure you click it, because that's how you let the system know who this person is. Same thing for the owner. You make sure you click on the name, and then you select your owner type. You can enter a filing representative. You are not required to. The last thing that you must fill out before you can save your job filing is you need to make sure that this question is answered correctly, which is, what is the filing? Does the filing include new work or legalization? New work is selected by default because that's what you're going to be filing more often. And then there is one more question you will see for alt CO jobs, and that is this alt CO job filing related to a new building job filing? If you choose yes here, then you must put the job number for the new building job filing, and you can put in a biz job number, or you can put in a DOB now job number. If you say no, of course, there's no job number to fill out. And that's all you are required to fill out in order to click save. So let me go ahead and do that. It will note what cannot be changed after that saving. And while that's working, let me go back over to my PowerPoint for a minute. So we talked about what needs to be entered in order to click save. We talked about how work on floors is not part of the location. Now, a couple of things that are different as you go through the rest of your job filing. First of all, you need to make sure you fill out all the fields as you see here. In the PW1, there will be one change that you will see early on in the PW1, which is the subcategories. For new building GC work type, there are only two subcategories for general construction, and they are construction and facade. For Alt CO, or indeed alteration jobs, there's 4 subcategories. Construction and facade are still there, but also enlargement and chimney. Enlargement and chimney are not offered for DOB Now new building jobs. And you'll also fill out your zoning information, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a sec, the scope of work, the technical reports, and the documents. There is a change to documents, and this is a change that I think you're going to like. Going forward, only one plan needs to be uploaded. No matter how many work types you choose, you no longer need to upload a separate plan for each work type. And this will be as of Monday. So that should make life a little easier. And of course, you need to do your statements and signatures. Because new building or Alt-CO job filings might prompt a site safety plan and/or a tenant protection plan, no work permit request can be initiated until that's been determined. The tenant protection plan is determined by a question on the owner's statement and signature. Site safety is determined by the characteristics of the job, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But until that has been determined, you cannot request a work permit. So you can't do a Prof Cert job filing with work permit for new building or Alt-CO jobs. So once you hit save, you will see your job number and you'll see your status bar. Now, I want you to notice something. There are some extra steps here for the status bar for a Prof Cert job file. Normally, when you were doing an alteration job, a Prof Cert job filing would go from pre-filing to pending Prof Cert QA assignment to Prof Cert QA review and then straight to approved. That is not the case for Alt-CO and new building jobs. New building and Alt-CO initial job filings must go through a plan examiner for zoning review, including review of the schedule of occupancy. So after the QA review is done, it's going to be sent over to the zoning review group, which is just referred to here as the CO group, COPE assignment, and CO plan examiner review. And then, of course, approved, then permit issued, and then CO issued. Nothing changes if you choose standard plan examination or review, because a standard plan review already goes through plan examiner review. So that same plan examiner will do the zoning review that is required. Then we get into the zoning tab. And one of the things to know is that you will need to fill out all of the information on the zoning tab in your initial job filing. However, when you do a subsequent job filing, most of the zoning tab is going to get auto-populated from that initial job filing, and it cannot be modified on the subsequent job filing. If you need to change something on the zoning information tab after your initial job filing has been approved, you will need to file a PAA. In addition, there is one other thing you may notice. Usually, for alteration or Alt-CO job filings, when you get into the building characteristics section, there's 2 columns, existing and proposed. For new building job filings, there will be no existing building characteristics column. It simply won't be there. It will only ask about proposed building characteristics because there is no existing building for a new building. And you need to specify the planning regulations, the occupancy classification, the construction classification, and so on and so forth. All of the things that are listed here. And remember, anytime you see this red asterisk, that means that it is a required field. As you get into your zoning tab, many of the characteristics, things like districts or FAR, that used to be included on the PW1 or on the plans, you're now going to have to enter that into the zoning information tab with things like this information. So now let's talk about the scope of work section. First of all, under scope of work, most work types will appear as tabs. General construction will not, but pretty much everything else will. And if those tabs show up, you do need to fill them out. And some of the tabs will ask a question about materials being used. If you choose concrete as a building material, then you're also going to see a concrete tab show up under scope of work. If you need more information about how concrete works, we went into it in a lot of detail in the design professional training for the December release. You can access that training, both a recording and the PowerPoint about it, from the DOB Now training page. In addition, before we get there, the schedule of occupancy is going to show up under the scope of work. So let's talk about the schedule of occupancy. Right now, you don't have a schedule of occupancy. You file a Schedule A, the PW1A job, and it lists existing and proposed information about each floor and or use of floors. And as part of the current Schedule A, you're actually supposed to put in information for every floor. The Schedule A, of course, is only applicable for new building and Alt-1 jobs. The Schedule A form is being replaced with the Schedule of Occupancy, which is a data collection tab now in DOB Now built. A Schedule of Occupancy is required as part of the job filing submission for a new building or Alt-CO job. And it contains a record of all proposed occupancy data per floor use on the bid. So that is how the system determines where you are doing work. Remember I said we don't have work on floors? That's because in the Schedule of Occupancy tab, anywhere you put in proposed occupancy means that you are doing work on that floor. You are also required to provide the existing occupancy details on the bid, even if you do not plan to work on those floor uses. The reason you have to do this is because the goal is to make it easier for the next person. If I go and I'm working on a 5-story building and I'm only working on the first and second floors, but I fill in the information for the whole building, then later on, once my colleague Abhishek goes to start his Alt-1 on that building, or his Alt-CO as we're now calling them, when he goes into the Schedule of Occupancy, all of the information that I put in and got approved by DOB is going to automatically show up on his Schedule of Occupancy. So all he'll have to do is put in the new stuff. So taking a little bit more time now will help you later. The Schedule of Occupancy then gets reviewed by DOB as part of the job filing review and approval. And once work is complete, you will request a certificate of occupancy, and the issuance of the certificate of occupancy will update the Schedule of Occupancy because the proposed use will now become the current use. And certificate of occupancies are now going to be requested in DOB Now bid. So I have a quick question, a knowledge check for you. True or false? I must provide occupancy details for all floors in the building, even if I am not doing work on those floors. So this knowledge check question will pop up in just a second. There we go. And I'll give you 45 seconds to answer this. All right. So we'll see the results in just a minute. And it looks again like the vast majority of you understood this. It is true. You must, if you are the first person who is entering occupancy details for a building, you must provide occupancy details for the entire building, even if you're not doing work. Now, at any given time for each building, there will be only one of each document. There will be one bin level schedule of occupancy, which we'll refer to as a BSO, and one certificate of occupancy. Those documents get triggered and or updated by a new building or Alt.CO job file. So the building schedule of occupancy contains a record of all existing and or proposed occupancy data per floor use on the bin, and it is required for any new building or Alt.CO job to begin. We'll talk about floor use in just a minute, but I still want to go into some stuff about how the schedule of occupancy works. The certificate of occupancy, of course, gets issued only when work is complete, and it allows for non-construction use of the space. So there's actually two kinds of schedules of occupancy. The bin level schedule of occupancy, or BSO, and the job level schedule of occupancy, or JSO. The job level schedule of occupancy is the one that corresponds exactly to Schedule A. So let's talk about the difference between these two. The bin level schedule of occupancy, there's only one per bin, and it gets created when the first building's schedule of occupancy request is approved. The job level schedule of occupancy is created when you file a job that is used to request a schedule of occupancy. So if I file my job where I'm working on floors 2 and 3, but I'm filling out the entire building, what I put into the schedule of occupancy tab is my job level schedule of occupancy. DOB is going to review it, and once they approve it, my job level schedule of occupancy information gets transferred over to the bin level schedule of occupancy. So when Abhishek comes by later and he's doing work on floors 3 and 4, he's going to create a new job level schedule of occupancy for his job that contains the information about what's changing. When he opens up the schedule of occupancy tab, he will see all of the records that are part of the bin level schedule of occupancy already on his tab. And he'll make changes where appropriate and then submit it. Those changes are his job level schedule of occupancy. And then when that gets approved, it updates the bin level schedule of occupancy with the new information. So when we refer to the job level schedule of occupancy, it's before it's gone to DOB for review. Bin level schedule of occupancy is what happens after review. When the job level information, it gets transferred to the bin level schedule of occupancy. Also, only one certificate of occupancy exists per bin. Each certificate of occupancy request contains one or more floor use records, and those floor use records are the ones that live on the building level schedule of occupancy. When the certificate of occupancy request is approved, the bin level schedule of occupancy will get updated. So the proposed work will become current work, existing work, or I should say existing occupancy. The schedule of occupancy and certificate of occupancy are broken down by the floor use of the building, which I talk about, I believe, on the next slide. Couple of other things you need to know. Only one new building job can be in progress at any given time for a given property, because that's going to be the master one for building the building. However, any number of jobs can be in progress in parallel for a given property if the job type is alteration CO or alteration. If you have a 50-story building, you might have 50 different jobs in parallel. I mean, it's unlikely, but it's theoretically possible. New building jobs also cannot be filed as legalization. So now let's talk a little bit more about floor use. Here's the basic concept. A single floor in a building can have more than one type of occupancy. So, for example, let's look at my floor plan here. This floor in my building actually has 4 types of occupancy. It's got offices, it's got storage, it's got some educational use, and it has residential use. Each type of occupancy on a floor is a separate floor use record on a schedule of occupancy. So this floor would have 4 floor use records, 1 for each type of occupancy. And of course, the schedule of occupancy then will feed into the certificate of occupancy. Now, there is a twist to this that you need to understand, because this is a little different. Records are organized by floor level use and occupancy. Now, for DOB Now build, all spaces of the same occupancy group on one floor, irrespective of their ownership or tenancy, must be combined into a single floor use record. I'm going to say that again because it's really important to understand. All spaces of the same occupancy group on one floor, irrespective of their ownership or tenancy, must be combined into a single floor use record. So let me give you an example of how that plays out. In my building, there are 3 retail stores on the first floor. One allows 30 people, one allows 20 people, one allows 50 people. Each store is a separate business entity with 2 independent means of egress. The 3 stores must be combined into a single record, and you add up their number of occupants, which in this case would be 100. Now, when you enter information about a floor use, this is just a chart showing you the fields that you'll be entering. And I'll go into how you enter those fields in a little bit. But there is a field. It is not a required field, but it is an optional field called Description of Use Comments. You can use that field to add clarification or additional information. However, it is advisable, and we do suggest that you keep the record as generic as possible, because you don't want to have to file Alt-CO applications for minor changes in occupancy. So it's things like you don't want to list corridors or electrical closets. This is going forward. Don't worry so much if it already was listed on the previous certificate of occupancy, but going forward, you want to be as generic as you can be. So let's talk a little bit more about bin level schedule of occupancy and job level schedule of occupancy. So in order to accommodate multiple jobs affecting occupancy on the same bin, whether they're one after another or going in at the same time, each applicable new building or Alt-CO initial job filing on a bin will have a job level schedule of occupancy. But there's only ever one bin level schedule of occupancy for the bin. First time a job level schedule of occupancy gets approved, that data is going to populate the bin level schedule of occupancy. Each later initial NB or Alt-CO job filing their schedule of occupancy will be auto-populated with the floor use data from the bin level schedule of occupancy. And what they do with that data on their schedule of occupancy tab is their JSO, their job level schedule of occupancy. And each job level schedule of occupancy that gets approved updates the bin level schedule of occupancy. And the bin level schedule of occupancy feeds into the certificate of occupancy because they're going to be using the same floor use records. And of course, the certificate of occupancy has to go through its own review. Now, let's talk about what data you might put in. As we saw on the paper PW1, there are two columns, existing and proposed. In the electronic system, you're going to see those same two columns, but you won't always be filling out both of them. So let's look at when you would be filling out both of them. If a space is currently being used for one purpose, but it's being changed to another use, then you put in the existing data and the proposed data. Now, so that's pretty straightforward, and that's going to be more often than not what you're doing. But there may be times when you do one or the other alone. If it is a new building job, you only need to fill in the proposed data because there is no existing data because it's a brand new building. So you would only be filling in the proposed data column. The existing data column is there, but grayed out. The other thing that might happen is you might fill out existing data only, and this is going to happen a lot when this first opens up. But the more people use it, the less often you're going to have to do it because you would put in existing data only if you are just filling out the information about current use and you are not making any change. So the first time you file a job filing for a building, that's highly likely. Not necessarily always, but much of the time that will happen, that you fill out existing data only. And then later on, if someone does work on those floors, they can fill out proposed data. I will show you how to fill out existing data only. So the schedule of occupancy shows up as a tab under the scope of work. And this is what it looks like. And we'll go into the live system in a little bit. If there is no bin level schedule of occupancy, then you need to fill out the schedule of occupancy for the entire building. This is not new, we talked about this. If there is a bin level schedule of occupancy for the building, you need to verify and update any existing information and add any missing data, along with entering your new floor use data. So, as we said, initial job filings for new building and alt-CO don't have a work on floors section. Instead, the identifying where you're doing the work is happening on the schedule of occupancy because you will be entering proposed occupancy for any floor where work is being performed. Anywhere there is proposed occupancy, there is work happening because it's not there yet, it's proposed because of the work. You can, of course, enter existing floor use data with or without proposed occupancy. However, at least one floor use record with proposed occupancy is required in order to submit a new building or alt-CO job file. Because you have to be working somewhere. Now, when you see job filings on your schedule of occupancy, there's 3 different statuses you may see, and I'm going to go through them not in the order they're listed. When you first enter data, what you will see is unverified. Unverified simply means that DOB has no formal record of occupancy for this floor. So you'll see that for any record that DOB hasn't looked at. But you'll also see it if there's a floor where we know that there's occupancy, but it predates the need for a certificate of occupancy. Active status means that the job filing that triggered the schedule of occupancy has been approved by DOB, and there is work proposed on the floor. So when you're doing work on the floor, it will show up an active status. So our same building, I go in, I'm working on floors 1 and 2. I fill in proposed data for floors 1 and 2, and then just existing data only for floors 3, 4, and 5. Abhishek comes in a little bit later, and it gets auto-populated. The floors 1 and 2 will show up on his schedule of occupancy as active, which means they are locked. He can't do anything with them. Verified status means the floor use or occupancy of the floor was granted by DOB, and there is no active work in progress on this floor. So if I finished my work on floors 1 and 2, and I got my certificate of occupancy, then those 2 floors would change from active to verified because DOB granted me occupancy on them. So now we have Abhishek coming in, and let's see what happens depending on status. Well, if he comes in while I'm working, then and sees that floors 1 and 2 are active, he cannot make any changes to my active floor use records because I'm the one that's doing work there. I could update them or change them, but he can't. If he sees an unverified floor use, say floor 5 is unverified, he can do pretty much whatever he wants to it if it started out from the bin level schedule of occupancy. If he adds proposed details, then the record will be updated and set to active status when his job level schedule of occupancy is approved. If he deletes an unverified floor, it's going to be marked as removed by user. But let's say what happened was when I was putting in my information, I gave DOB enough information that they said, yes, we are verifying that floors 3, 4, and 5, the information Martha gave us is correct. Well, when Abhishek comes in and those floor use records are verified, he cannot modify the existing use. He can add proposed details if he's doing work there, or he could even delete it if he's, say, removing the top floor. So if he's been hired to demolish the top floor, floor 5, then he could delete that. Now, if he deletes that floor use record, it will show up as removed by user. But regardless of status, any of the floors that he sees can be copied to make new records, and then he can edit those as needed. And I will show you how to copy floor use records. So when you go in to enter your schedule of occupancy, the first step depends on whether it is a new building or an alt CO. If it's a new building, then you will only be asked the proposed applicable building code, which of course would be 2014 because that's the current one. Hold on just a moment. I'm sorry about that, I had to cough. So it would only ask the proposed building code. It would not ask the existing building code. And then you would add a new record by clicking the add button. For our purposes, we're going to focus on alt CO jobs because those are going to be more common than new building. So it's a little bit one extra step for an alt CO, which is instead of just putting in the proposed building code, you need to put in the existing building code and then the proposed building code, or vice versa, but you need to have both. And then you would click plus add, and then you get the pop-up. So let's check this out. Oh, I got logged out. Let's log back in. So this one that we just started is right on top. And we're going to go to the schedule of occupancy. And one of the things I want you to note is I cannot click add until I've selected the building codes. So you'll notice for the existing building code, you get options of any of these. I'm going to select 2014. So my building was built in 2015, and now I'm doing an update to it. And so, of course, the update also would be in the 2014 code. and I click Add. Now, on this form, let's go back to my PowerPoint for a moment. The Schedule of Occupancy form pops up. First, I need to select the applicable floor space. And for some of them, I will also have to put in a floor number. I'll show that to you. And then I need to fill in all of the rest of the information. So let's look at this. I'm going to start, my building has a basement. And currently in the basement, it is being used for storage. Now, the way these fields work is they are what's called cascading fields, which means your choice in one affects what is available in the next one. So when I chose 2014 as the existing building code, it affected what showed up here. It showed up all the options for 2014. When I choose storage, then my occupancy group shows me all the options for what's available there. Now, the last field that I have to select from a list is description of use. And I can either click in this box or I can click on select. But I must choose one of the options and only one of the options that are listed with the radio buttons here. So I can say there was clothing being stored in the basement. Now, I have been asked to change this from storage to an actual store. Now, it's not giving me a choice of occupancy group because there is only one occupancy group for mercantile. And when I choose description of use, I can say retail sales. I can put in description of use comments, but they are not required. What is required, however, is I must enter the live load. This is the basement says on the ground. The maximum number of people that is allowed in the space. Because it was storage, there were only 10, but we're turning it into a store. So we're going to say 100. And I need to enter the zoning use group. If there are dwelling or rooming units, you must enter those here. The number of dwelling or rooming units. Now, the last thing I need to enter for the existing occupancy type, or for the existing occupancy data, is I need to enter what type of occupancy it has. If, for example, it had temporary occupancy, then I would need to enter the expiration date. And you can choose a date in the past. The system doesn't care. But if I say that there was final occupancy granted, then I do not need to fill in a date because final occupancy does not expire. The last thing here is the job reference. Now, right now it's showing the job that I'm filing now, but you're going to need to change that because when you do your due diligence to discover what the existing occupancy is, you will need to find out what the job reference number was that established that occupancy and enter that here because that's how we can check that the information is correct. So you will need to change this. You can enter a DOB NOW job number. You can enter a BIZ job doc number. You can enter a number from before BIZ. You could even enter NA if there isn't one, if the building predates the need for a schedule of occupancy. The existing occupancy type is not applicable, of course, for the proposed data. I'm not going to change this right now, but just know that you have to change it. And when I click OK, it saves my record. So let's look over here. So, for example, if I were selecting, this is storage, and then group 1, and then choosing furniture, and then I enter in the rest of the fields. Once the schedule of occupancy form is complete, you click Add, and then click OK on this pop-up. We did that. Now, before I get into some more stuff here, let's do this again a couple of times so that you can see the process. Well, next thing that I want to do is I want to, in my building, enter the data for the first floor. The first floor is currently being used for a store. It's a retail store. And I've been asked to change that. That store is moving downstairs to the basement. And I have been asked to change this because there's going to be a bank on the first floor. Again, I need to enter live load. And these numbers may or may not change. Things like maximum number of people permitted. And I need to enter the existing occupancy type for the existing occupancy. So this was also granted final. And I put in the job reference number for that same occupancy. I click add. Now, I have only been asked to do work on the basement and the first floor, but this is a 5-story building, and I know that. And so I can look here and see, oh, I don't see anything for any of the building. It was completely blank when I started. I'm the first person to be entering this. So I need to enter data for all of the floors. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the next floor, which would be floor number 2. Now, right now, I'm expected to fill out both the existing and the proposed columns. I don't want to enter proposed data because I'm not doing work on this floor. I'm just going to enter existing data. So the way I do that is I don't change anything in the existing column. But in the proposed column under this drop down, I can choose not applicable. That's not applicable because I'm not doing anything there. That grays out the entire column and I cannot enter anything. So what I need to do is enter the data for the existing occupancy. So it's currently being used, oops, I skipped a little, for business, and it's offices. I want you to notice something. If you are not doing work there, you are not required to enter live load, maximum number of people, or zoning use group. You can, but it's not required. All that is required is that you enter the existing occupancy type and you put in the job reference number that established that occupancy. Now let's look at some information about what we can do with these records when they show up. The records are going to show up with the most recent one on top by default. And it's going to show you the existing and the proposed description of use by default. See, description of use. But, you know, I may decide that that's not the most useful thing for me. I want to see something different. If I click on the drop-down arrow, it shows me all of the other options for showing data. I could say I want to see the occupancy classification, and that pops up. I could say I want to see the maximum number of people. I want to see the live load. Whatever it is I want to see, I can choose here. In addition, there's some options in these 4 columns. As you start entering data for large buildings, you're going to start ending up with a lot of floor use records. There will be a minimum of 1 record for each of those floors. So what we need to do is figure out how to find the floor we're looking for. And there's 2 things we can do for that. We can sort here the data, or we can filter it. Sorting the data is done by you click on the drop down, the little drop down arrow next to these 4 columns, and choose either sort ascending or sort descending. You can also filter this data by typing into the box under the column header. So if I needed to do work on floor 27 of a 40-story building, I could just type in 27 and it would pop up. For each of the 4 use records, there are 3 buttons that may be available. Copy, which allows you to duplicate a record, view and edit, and delete. Now, you can also get into an existing 4 use record by double clicking on the line. You can click the view edit button, or you can double click on the line. So you update it by either clicking on the view edit or double clicking on the line, and the schedule of occupancy pop-up shows up again. And so you enter whatever information needs to be changed. You can also duplicate 4 use records using the copy button. And this is what is going to make your life so much easier when you are entering data for existing buildings. Because what copying does is it creates a new 4 use record where you can specify the floor or the floor range and the number of duplicates. And it will duplicate all information other than the floor number. So let's try that. Floor 2 is offices. Floors 3, 4, and 5 are also offices. So I'm going to copy this record. And I want to go floor number from floor 3 to floor 5 and create duplicates. And what this will do is it will create 1 duplicate for each floor with the office information from the floor 2. And just like that, I've got all my floors. Now, if I need to edit one of these or change something about it, I can. If I were told, oh, you know what, I actually want you to do something on floor 5. I want you to build a cafeteria on the 5th floor. So I can do that. I can say assembly A2 and select cafeteria. Now note, once I put in proposed data, I now do need to enter the live load, the maximum number of people in the zoning use group. And then I update that, and it will just update that 1 record. And so when I submit my job filing, the system is going to know that I am working on the basement, the 1st floor, and the 5th floor, because those are the ones that have proposed use. One other thing to point out is the flags. New records, however they are created, show up with a red flag. And the red flag means that that record does not exist on the bin level schedule of occupancy. See, the title of the column is bin schedule of occupancy, and the red flag means no. All of these say no. And the reason they all say no is because no one's ever entered any information for this building. If a building level schedule of occupancy exists, then when you open the schedule of occupancy tab for your new job, you will see blue flags that indicate that floor use record started out on the building level on the bin level schedule of occupancy. So the blue flag means it came from the bin level schedule of occupancy. So in this particular case, there's 1 floor that I added, but there's 2 floors that came from the bin S of O as active. And because they came in as active, I can't do anything with them. There's a lock icon here, and the delete icon does not work. I can view those records by clicking on the view edit button, but it won't let me edit it. And of course, I can copy those records, but I cannot delete them because they belong to someone else's job. So you must do this as part of your job. I'm going to compile activities for your job filing. And then the last thing you need to do before you can file your initial job filing is to pay your fee. Well, we're introducing something new in terms of paying fees. This is, I should specify, this is new to DOB Now built. This is not new to DOB. So alteration jobs in DOB Now built, you must pay the full fee amount before you file your job filing. For new building and Alt-CO jobs, you may be offered the option to pay a lower fee at the initial filing. So when you click Pay Now for a new building or Alt-CO initial job file, you may be offered a lower amount. And whether or not you get offered it and how much it is depends on the amount of the total filing fee. So there is a minimum fee depending on the details of your job filing. If your total filing fee is less than the minimum fee, you must pay the minimum fee because that's the minimum. If your total filing fee is more than the minimum fee, but less than twice the minimum fee, your options are the minimum fee or the full fee. However, if your total filing fee is greater than or equal to twice the minimum fee, your option is you can pay 50% of the filing fee or you can pay the full fee. These rules also apply to PAAs when the estimated job cost has increased and you're required to make a payment. Other fee types, like the record management fee, the bounce check fee, or the energy code compliance review fee, will not be included in the 50% calculation. I'm going to show this to you in a minute, but this applies only to initial job filings. Subsequent job filings, well, first of all, they don't charge records management fees. That's a side point. I just wanted to mention that. But subsequent job filings require the entire fee to be paid in full before you submit your job file. So what is that fee for subsequent job filings? Well, depends. If your initial filing is new building or new building with existing elements to remain, your subsequent fee is a flat fee of $100. However, if your initial filing is Alt-CO, the subsequent fee is going to be calculated based on the details of the job. So let's look at how this pops up. I'm going to show you in the system. Let's save this just in case. And then we're going to go to our dashboard. I'm going to show you a different job file. So this job filing is ready to go. I've done everything I need, but I still need to pay my fee. When I click Pay Now, what pops up is an option. It says proceed with minimum / 50% of the filing fee or proceed with the full payment. Notice it's giving me the amount of the full payment, but on here it does not give me the amount of the alternate payment. I would have to choose that and click confirm to see that amount. If you choose to pay less than the full fee, then you need to pay the rest of your fee before you can request your work permit. The actual paying the fee is the same as it's always been through the city pay system. So a couple of other things you should know. Both the applicant of record and the owner must attest to the job filing, and fees must be paid before the job filing can be submitted. This is not new. Now, for GC alterations, initial job filings, plain old alterations, you can choose a TR final progress inspection or a DOB Now inspector. That is not an option for new building and Alt-CO initial job filings. Permit sign-off for those new building and Alt-CO initial job filings can only be done through DOB Now inspections. A TR final progress inspection is allowed for subsequent new building and Alt-CO job filings where the work type allows it. Now, another thing that you may like, a nice change, is regardless of review type, an applicant of record can delete any optional TR special or progress inspections. They can delete them prior to plan approval, even if the attestation is done on the TR. And they can also be deleted by PAA, even if the special or progress inspector has been identified. However, you cannot delete a special or progress inspection once the inspector has completed the certification of the inspection. A few more points. Just as a reminder, if you chose professional certification as your review type for your new building or Alt-CO initial job file, there's also a zoning review that goes through a plan examiner. And plan examiners, whether it's from standard plan examination or the zoning review plan examiner, have the option, if something's wrong, to raise an objection. If objections are raised, the process for responding to them and requesting appointments is exactly the same as what we covered in the design professional training for the December 2020 release. There's a link here to go see it. You can go through all the steps. Nothing has changed. There's one change in the length of appointments. The steps are the same, but appointments for resolving objections to new building job filings are twice as long. They are 40 minutes long. For Alt-CO job filings, or in fact alteration job filings, appointments are 20 minutes long. Now, some additional information. Once all the floor use records on the job have gotten a non-renewable certificate of occupancy, you can't do anything else. There's no subsequent filings, no PAAs, no permit renewals, no AHVs. Jobs are not considered complete, however, until the final CO is granted for all the floor uses in the entire building. Final certificates of occupancy in DOB Now Build can only be issued for the entire building at once. In all other cases, even if you have gotten a interim certificate of occupancy, which does not expire, the job will continue to be in process. Now let me go into how these new job types affect site safety plans, tenant protection plans, and permits. Now, if you came to the site safety class from the last new hire training, you should know that site safety plans can be triggered by any GC filing. They can also be triggered by structural, foundation, or supportive excavation filings. The applicability of the site safety plan is determined by the system based on how you answer certain questions on the job filing. And that determination is not done until after the job filing is approved. Work permits cannot be requested until the site safety process is complete. This includes determination of the need for site safety and approval of the site safety plan or waiver if it's applicable. So that part hasn't changed, but in the site safety training from the last rollout, we had a chart very much like this about alteration jobs. I wanted to go through what the charts are for Alt-CO and new building, and I wanted to talk about how you can use them. I'm not going to go through every line of this chart. I'm just going to explain how you can use it. If you download the PowerPoint, you can get a copy of this chart. So what you do with this is you read across. If you are doing horizontal enlargement, the basic requirement is for a construction superintendent as your site safety person. But depending on the number of stories, the building height, or the structural footprint, you may need a site safety coordinator or a site safety manager, or you may be required to use a site safety manager. So you can use this chart to determine if a site safety plan is needed, and if so, what's the site safety personnel required. That's for Alt-CO, and that in fact is the same chart as for alterations. So if you already have that, it's the same chart. Now, if it is an Alt-CO when alteration is required to meet new building requirements, that is, or in other words, a new building with existing elements to remain, or a new building, you're always required to have a site safety person and a site safety plan. However, if the building is only 1 to 9 stories, it's a construction superintendent. And as I mentioned in the previous training, a construction superintendent, if a construction superintendent is required, you must have a site safety plan on site, but you do not need to submit it to DOB for approval. So you need to know about this, and you need to have a construction superintendent, have a site safety plan, but you don't need to submit it for approval before you can request your work permit. Now, what about tenant protection plans? Well, those are based on a question that is asked on the initial GC filing. The question is, the building to be altered, constructed, or demolished contains 1 or more dwelling units that will be occupied during construction. If you say yes, a tenant protection plan is required. Very straightforward. That question is only going to be asked on the initial GC filing for a new building or alt-CO job. It's not going to be asked on any subsequent filings. You will see the question there with the same answer that you put on your initial filing, but you won't be able to change it on your subsequent filings. Now, let's talk, when can you request your work permit? The vast majority of this is not new. There is one small thing that's new. Before you can request your work permit, you must have if a tenant protection plan is required, it must be approved. If a site safety plan or site safety waiver is required, that must be approved. If you are using concrete and you have a TR3, that needs to be filled out. This is the one thing that's different in this entire page. If less than the full fee was paid upon job filing, the rest of the fee must be paid before you can request a work permit. You're going to need to complete all tabs of the work permit request, and you need to do all of the necessary attestations on the work permit. And then, of course, the work permit must be granted before any work can begin. If you need more information on work permits, check out the contractor training from the December 2020 release. This is a link to it. Let's do a knowledge check here. True or false? If you pay less than the full fee when you file the initial job filing, you must pay the rest of the fee before requesting the permit. This will pop up in just a sec. There we go. Please answer the question. All right, we'll see our responses in a sec. And it looks like the vast majority of you got it again. The answer is true. If you pay less than the full fee upon filing the job, you need to pay the rest before you request the work permit. There is one small difference that you'll see on the work permits themselves, and that's the permit classification. It's going to list what the job type is, whether it's new building, alteration CO, or you may also see temporary construction, which will come up for protection mechanical methods and for supportive excavation work types. Now let's talk about what changes in post-approval amendments and subsequent job filings. First of all, if your initial or subsequent filing is filed as legalization, then you cannot initiate a post-approval amendment on a legalization job filing. In addition, you cannot initiate a PAA on a job filing if all of the floor uses that are in scope, the ones that you are doing work on, have been issued non-renewable occupancy. After you submit your job filing for review, you can submit corrections, and that can change So until your job filing has been assigned to a plan examiner, you can submit corrections. And those corrections can be on the job level schedule of occupancy. You'll be able to add, delete, or edit any records that are added in the proposed details as part of the filing. If you do delete a floor use record, which has proposed details, it will show up as removed by user. You can also use a post-approval amendment after approval to add new proposed work. New records, of course, will be added, will show up with a status of unverified, which will change to active upon approval. And you can only do that if you cannot, even with a PAA, you cannot change someone else's active floor use record. You can only change your own. So subsequent job filings, what's allowed? I am not going to read out all of these, but there are two work types that are allowed for Alt-CO subsequent filings, but are not allowed for new building subsequent filings. And they are antenna and sign. Antenna and sign are allowed for Alt-COs, and they're not allowed for new buildings. All the rest are the same. Now, when you file a subsequent filing for a new building or an Alt-CO, you do need to fill out the work on floors section. And you can only choose from the floors that have been established on the schedule of occupancy by the initial filing. You cannot do a subsequent filing if, and this bit I've said a couple of times, if all floor uses that are in scope on an Alt-CO or NB job have received a CO recommendation of interim or partial data from inspections, if they have a CO of interim or partial, or if a CO request is in progress. Interim or partial are non-renewable occupancies. So if they've got it, if you have a CO recommendation for that, or they already have that, you cannot initiate a subsequent filing. You also cannot initiate a subsequent filing while a certificate of occupancy request is in progress. So now that I've gone over a bunch of stuff, we're going to shift gears, and I'm going to hand this over to my colleague Abhishek. Abhishek is going to talk to you about temporary bin requests.
Thank you, Martha. Hello, everyone. This is Abhishek Namani from DOB Now training team. Today, I will go over how to request a temporary building identification number, which is TBIN. So right now, the process of submitting a temporary building identification number, first, you need to request a confirmation of the address from the topographical bureau at the appropriate borough president's office. The borough president need to stamp and sign a PD1 plot diagram form, and you may also need a lot merger or an apportionment form. The current process is that you submit them to DOB by email. You're going to use the same forms in the future. Instead of sending them through email, you're going to send it through DOB Now system. So let's talk a little bit when you might need a temporary bin. The TBINs are created in one of the two situations. If there is already an existing bin and you want to file plans to demolish an existing building and build a brand new one in its place. Full demolition is not a part of DOB Now build, but you can still file for a temporary bin even if you're. The other possibility is that you enter an address which system can't find the bin, and there are different ways that could happen. The address is not found for the building, or it could be the lot is vacant, or it could be the bin is obsolete, or it could be the bin is a dummy bin. Whatever the reason that doesn't show up, if you're trying to file a job filing and the address is invalid, DOB Now build is not going to let you do that. It's going to throw you this error message. The bin is not found. So let's look what this TBin request is. Whenever you're ready to request the temporary bin, you log into DOB Now build and navigate to the dashboard and click Plus Request button and scroll down to the temporary bin. Once you click the temporary bin, that request have 3 tabs: general information, documents, statements, and signatures. You can now begin the location information and select the building type from the drop-down list. Also, in the general information section, you need to enter the stakeholder information. You can enter up to 2 stakeholders. They can be anyone who has a registration with DOB Now, including delegated associates or filing representatives. The last section in the general information is general request information. You must enter the reasons for submitting the temporary bin request. And if you want, you can enter the comments in the comment section, which are optional. Hit save before you move to the next tab. A TBin request tracking number will auto-generate and a status bar will appear. Let me show you this in the forum. I've logged in with my user and click Plus Request button and select the temporary bin from the list of the option. In the location information, I'll give a test address, Prince Boulevard. This is in Queens, block number 10, block number 20, and the zip code 11375. Select the building type from the drop-down list. I'll select 1 or 2 family. In the stakeholder information, I'll give my email ID. The rest of the information is populated. However, the secondary contact information is optional. I'll leave that blank. In the general request information section, enter the reasons for the TBin request and hit save. TBin request is saved, and you will see a TBin request tracking number, which is auto-generated, and the status bar will appear on top of the page. I'll talk a little bit about the documents. Once the TBin request is saved, let's now go to the documents section. Whatever the documents you put together, that's what we can upload it here. Click Upload button to upload the document. If you have any additional supporting documents, you can also upload it from additional supporting documents tab. In the Statements and Signature tab, only the primary contact is required to attest by clicking the checkbox. Hit save and submit. The status changes from pre-filing to pending assignment, and make sure to always save and submit for a best practice. Let me show you this part. I'm in the portal. In the document section, click the upload button and I will select appropriate document. Click upload and say OK. And the documents is uploaded. In the statements and signature, click the checkbox. Hit save. TBin saved and submit. And the status should change from pre-filing to pending assignment. Once the TBin request is saved, whether or not you submit, you can click on the 3 bars or the hamburger icon to see the temporary bin from the list of the options. Also, you can able to see the status of the temporary bin request. So ideally, your temporary bin request will be approved. However, reviewer might have any objections. The status changes to objections, and a new objections or appointments tab will appear. Here, a new Objections or Appointments tab will appear. If you want to see the details of the objections and change the objection status, you can change it to Resolved and enter the comments in the comment section. Also, if they allow any appointments, you can do it too by clicking the Plus Appointments button. In the portal, click the three lines or the hamburger icon, select the temporary ban. You would be able to see all the filing statuses. And you will see an Objection/Appointments tab. Select and able to see the details of the objections. You can change it to Resolved and enter the comments. Objections resolved and hit Update. If you have any appointments, you can do it too by clicking the Place Appointments button. We really appreciate your time and thank you very much for attending the training.